The night the championship ended, the city learned what a trap feels like from the inside. It did not begin with violence. That was the cruelty of it. It began with celebration, with the arena at full roar and the lights white hot and the fire ferrets standing at the edge of a victory they had earned the honest way. Korra went into the ring with water at her back and her team at her sides, and for 6 minutes she was allowed to be exactly what she was, an athlete, a teammate, a girl who had found one clean thing in a broken year. Then the lights went wrong. Not dark, wrong. The kind of wrong that tells 10,000 people at once that the rules have changed and no one has asked their opinion. The roar of the crowd did not stop so much as curdle, joy turning to confusion, turning to the particular silence of a large animal sensing a predator. And out of that silence, patient as arithmetic, a voice began to speak. Amon had not come to fight, he had come to teach. That was always the difference between him and an ordinary terrorist, and the reason he would be so much harder to kill than one. He did not want the arena, he wanted the lesson. He stood in the center of the ring, the way a teacher stands before a blackboard, and he spoke of fairness and of power and of the long accounting that was coming due, and the crowd, because it was terrified and because some part of the crowd had always suspected the accounting was real, listened. Then he demonstrated. The champions of the season were brought forward, and what happened to them happened quickly, and it happened without mercy, and it happened in front of everyone, which was the point. A man who had bent his whole life, who had built his identity and his livelihood and his body's deepest habits around a gift he had never chosen and never questioned, was unmade in the space of a breath, not killed. Unmade. Left standing with his hands still shaped for a power that was no longer there, Tano, because Tano was never going to go down without a fight, fought. It did not help. It was never going to help. That was the second lesson, and Amon delivered it with the same terrible patience as the first. Korra moved the way she always moved when someone she loved was threatened, which was to say all at once and without any plan except toward. She got to the ring. She got her hands on Equalist cloth and Equalist bone. And she learned, in the worst classroom in the world, that fury without a target is just noise. The masks were everywhere and nowhere. The night swallowed them. When it was over, the arena was emptying in a panic. The champions were kneeling in the ring with their hands empty, and the Avatar was standing in the middle of the wreckage with her 3 elements roaring around her and absolutely nothing left to bend at. The city that night did not sleep. It held its breath. On Air Temple Island, around a radio that had become the most important object in the Republic, a strange little family huddled to listen. An airbending child who had seen too much. An old man who had defected from his own generation to be young again. An earthbender whose heart was too big for the war that was coming. And Asami Sato, who had no business being on that island at all, and who was there anyway, because the ledger had stopped balancing and she had stopped knowing which side of it she was standing on. The voice on the radio spoke of resolve, and of comrades, and of a day that would come, and of benders trembling. The 4 of them looked at each other without a word. The revolution was winning. Asami did not say anything. She had rehearsed for months what she would feel at this moment. Triumph, she had thought. Vindication. The clean satisfaction of an argument finally proven. What she felt instead was a hollow where the triumph was supposed to go. And in the hollow, uninvited, the image of a waterbender girl standing in a ruined ring with nothing left to bend at. She kept her face perfect. She was very good at keeping her face perfect. It was, she was beginning to understand, the only thing she was still entirely good at. The council, being a council, responded to the disaster the way councils do. It looked for a throat. The throat it found belonged to Lin Beifong. The police chief had held the city together with metal cables and sheer spite for longer than anyone could remember, and for that service she was now offered up as the explanation for the city's failure. The arena had fallen on her watch, therefore the failure was hers. It was elegant. It was even plausible, if you never looked the chief in the eye. And it was, Korra understood within about 10 seconds of hearing it, the exact kind of lie that made the Equalist's argument true. She had not wanted Tarlok's task force. She had said so repeatedly in every dialect available to her, but the councilman held the chief's badge in one hand and the avatar's signature in the other, and so Korra did the only thing she could do. She reminded him of the price they had already struck. If he wanted her in his machinery, the chief stayed on the force. The deal had been a trade before the arena. After the arena, it was a debt, and Korra collected debts the way she did everything else, all at once and in person. Tarlok, to his credit, chuckled. He was a man who respected a price. The chief kept her badge, the avatar joined the task force, and the city acquired its newest and least cooperative soldier. The task force was everything Korra had expected and worse. It raided. It kicked in doors in the name of order and found frightened families. It confiscated masks and made mask makers of the confiscated. It measured its victories and arrests and its defeats in the same arithmetic, which should have been a warning and was not, because arithmetic was all it had. Korra went where she was sent and hit what she was told to hit, and came back each night with her knuckles split and her conscience splitting, and Mako, who had been living on stress and caffeine since before the arena, and had not improved his recipe since, watched her do it with the expression of a man counting cracks in a dam. It was in those weeks that Korra discovered what she was actually for. It was not the task force. It was not the council. It was the stripped. They were everywhere now, the unmade. Benders who had lost their bending in the arena or in the raids or in the dark mathematics of Amon's justice, walking the city with their hands shaped for powers that were gone. And Korra, who had her own wounds and her own south and her own long list of things she was supposed to be and had failed to be, found that she could sit with them in a way that no one else could. Because she was not offering them hope. She was not offering them philosophy. She was offering them the one thing she had in abundance, which was company at the bottom. She sat with a young woman of the arena, one of the unmade, on a night when the city was loud with curfew sirens, and the young woman kept whispering that she refused to surrender, and then wondering, in the same breath, whether refusing to surrender was just another word for being afraid. Korra listened. That was the whole of her technique. She listened, and then she said the truest thing she knew. She did not embrace what had been done to her. She said it plainly, without decoration. Embracing was a lie people told to make suffering look like a gift. What had been done to her was not a gift. It was a theft. But a theft was not a verdict. Somewhere under the stolen thing there was still a person, and that person got to choose. To ask for the bending back, or to learn a new road, or to walk away from bending entirely, it mattered which, but it mattered less than the choosing. Whether you choose to live on your own terms, that was the whole of the advice. It was not much. It was everything she had. The young woman was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, very small, whether she should embrace the change. Korra snorted. The sound was so honest it made them both laugh, and the laugh was the first clean thing either of them had touched in weeks. That was the avatar the city was not getting in those weeks. The task force got her fists. The council got her signature. The stripped got the rest. While Korra was learning what she was for, Asami was learning what she had become. Her father's pressure had stopped being pressure and become a schedule. He wanted the avatar committed to the council's war, and he wanted his daughter to be the instrument, and he asked for it gently, reasonably, in the voice of a man who had never been refused, and Asami agreed to it, gently, reasonably, and did nothing. She was not trying. She had admitted that to herself in the dark, which was the only place she admitted anything. She was not trying to convince Korra, and she was no longer certain that her hesitation was strategy. Strategy had a shape. Strategy ended. This thing in her chest had neither. So she kept her other ledger, and the other ledger kept her. She hired non-benders at future industries, visibly, steadily, and she meant it when she said the company gave a fair chance to everyone willing to work. She met a man in the ironworks district who lived in a shelter and told her, looking at the ground, that he could work hard, that he would not disappoint her. She believed him. She had him told they would reach out. And every time she signed one of those small rescues into the light, she signed another entry into the dark, because the mechs her company built were cutting into the spirit wilds of the council's order. And the vines were fighting back, and the spirits were angry, and she had stood in a demonstration yard and watched the machines tear into living light and smiled for a councilman while doing it. She had felt a pang, thinking of what Korra would call that. She had masked the pang with a smile. She was very good at the smile. The city was splitting her down the middle, and the two halves were no longer speaking to each other. That was the danger, though she would not have named it so. A double ledger can survive almost anything except a moment when both columns are read aloud at once, and the war, indifferent to everyone's interior arithmetic, kept its own pace. The Equalists kept winning. The Council kept losing. The Red Lotus kept its own calendar in the shadows of the shadows, and its interest in the Avatar remained theological rather than political, which made it patient in a way the Equalists were not. Two fires, one address. And over all of it, quiet as snowfall, the spirit world kept watching, and the whispers that crossed the veil were growing less like warnings and more like appointments. Something was coming to Korra. Some low point the war had been saving for her. Some moment at which the broken girl from the south would be asked to decide what an avatar is when the avatar can no longer win. And someone, standing very close to her, someone whose ledger was about to be read aloud, would have to ask a question that could not be unasked. The city did not know any of this. The city was busy being afraid. But on Air Temple Island, late at night, a girl who performed grace for a living stood at a railing and looked toward the water and felt the wind move against her hair in a way it had been doing more and more often. Lately, gently, attentively, like a hand waiting to be noticed. She did not notice it. Not yet. And in the dark behind the city's sphere, a silhouette that looked exactly like the Avatar kept its own patient distance, watching the areas, waiting for something, refusing to say what. The first act of the war was closing. The lowest point was one bad night away. And the question that would define everything after it, the question of whether the Avatar could ever forgive what was coming, was already in the air, unspoken, circling both girls like the wind.